This is a 1939 moment, or hopefully a 1981 moment, a moment of mounting urgency. Enemies gather, threats grow, you feel it, I feel it. We must prepare now.
整个动作亮点的解读就是，像跳舞是最能体现一个集权。
China-US relations finally all look calm on the surface. Smiles, handshakes, red carpet summits, and the language of stability echoing from Washington to Beijing. But realistically, beneath that calm, both countries are scrambling to ensure that their interdependence disappears. The relationship between the United States and China has entered a new phase, not open conflict, not yet, but one that's defined by strategic distrust, the weaponization of trade, and a slow-motion divorce in technology, trade, and the dollar. It's not without reason that the poison pill clauses were added into the recent trade negotiations with Malaysia and Cambodia, and even the downgraded Blackwell chip is said to be off limits for China. Washington's internal consensus is that China wants to reshape global governance away from US dominance. And Beijing sees Washington's sanctions, tech bans, and the military encirclement as proof that the US seeks to contain its rise. So for all the talk of stability and dialogue, both governments see each other as systemic rivals, not partners. Take a look at these videos.
The scale of Optimus, like I said, that's really going to be something else. I think it's going to be the biggest product of all time.
Elon Musk just said at his latest shareholder meeting a couple of days ago that his Optimus will be the biggest product of all time ever. And on the basis of this and a few other KPIs, he's been awarded a salary that will hit $1 trillion if he meets them. Tesla aims to produce more than 1 million robots by 2030. Xiaopeng Iron, which is what the Chinese humanoid robot is called, is also on track for mass production by 2026. It was so human-like that the CEO of Xiaopeng had to cut it open to prove it was not human, as people just didn't believe him otherwise. Xiaopeng is only worth $22 billion versus Tesla's $1.4 trillion market capitalization. I don't know what the salary of the CEO of Xiaopeng is going to be, but I think we can safely assume it's going to be nowhere near Elon Musk's salary. So while Elon Musk promises a $1 trillion robot economy, China's Xiaopeng is quietly building one of his own at 1/50th the market cap, but with the same ambition. And that's the real competition. Not just cars or chips, but who owns the future of automation itself. Now, what you just saw in these videos, combine that with Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia's comments that the Chinese are only nanoseconds behind the Americans when it came to AI. This comment was one of the factors which led to a massive market decline last week. Now you can understand why, despite both sides talking about managing competition, what's actually being managed is a global power shift. Frontier AI systems are on the cusp of truly transformative capabilities. Technological discovery and productivity growth stand to accelerate massively. It's clear that the future geopolitical power will be dependent on the global distribution of AI compute. Economics and militaries with the most powerful and widely deployed AI systems will pull ahead rapidly. The US sees its continued dominance in AI as the only way to preserve its own national interest. One of the biggest interdependence any country has with the US is the dollar, and the Chinese are building their way around this. The latest strategy is being called the Gold Corridor, a network that is going to stretch from Shanghai through Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, linking mines, refiners, and central banks into a new system of settlement that doesn't depend on the dollar at all. The People's Bank of China is promoting a plan to attract central banks, particularly from friendly or non-aligned nations, to purchase gold and store it in custodian warehouses that are connected to the Shanghai Gold Exchange International Board. China's central bank is opening gold vaults in Hong Kong and in other friendly countries, and it's courting these other central banks and major institutions to custody their gold holdings outside Europe and the United States. Now, at a time when the dollar has been weaponized through the threat of sanctions and seizures, it is attracting interest for many in the BRICS blocs, amongst others. The initiative focuses on new gold purchases, which helps to reduce that resistance that would happen from countries moving away their current stockpiles from those traditional centers of London and New York. Cambodia is set to become one of the first countries to store part of its national gold reserves in China. For the first time since 1996, foreign central banks' gold reserves have overtaken their US Treasury holdings. This is massive. Take a look at the chart. Crossing above treasuries signals that reserve managers are prioritizing durability, portability, that is the right to take their dollars wherever they wish, and neutrality over the yield, over the interest rate they were being given from those treasuries. Now, this increase is particularly strong in emerging markets, and it's not a coincidence. It's a vote of basically no confidence in the dollar. This comes at a time when the two countries present now competing global narratives, with the US promoting its America first versus China emphasizing at all meetings and gatherings the importance of multipolarity. Then listening to the statements by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth makes it clear military and security flashpoints are intensifying despite diplomacy projecting calm. The Pacific is heating up. US bases are expanding in the Philippines. Japan is rearming. The new Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi suggested that Tokyo could even take military action if Beijing attacked neighboring Taiwan. And this has started a controversy where a Chinese diplomat, the Consul General in Osaka, Zhu Jian, in a post on X on Saturday, shared a news article about Takaichi's remarks about Taiwan and commented, "The dirty neck that sticks itself in must be cut off." The post was later deleted. However, the US ambassador to Japan has jumped in to offer his thoughts, saying that he thought that the post directly threatens the Prime Minister Takaichi directly. Now let's jump in deeper into each one of these. It's been building up over time, but in early November it burst open. Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang, the man at the center of the global AI boom, made a remark that Washington didn't want to hear. In an interview with the Financial Times, Huang said that China is going to win the AI race. He warned that cutting China off from advanced AI chips would backfire. That, in his words, if we don't compete in China, their technology will spread everywhere else. It sounds like common sense, but in the current climate in the US, it's heresy. Within 3 days, Nvidia's shares tumbled more than 9%. Over $500 billion of market value was wiped out as investors panicked over the backlash. And Huang, treated like a prophet of AI, found himself being accused of being too soft on China. But the real story wasn't the backlash. It was what Huang admitted next. He said Nvidia's market share in China's data center chips, once which was around 95%, had fallen to 0. And from now on, he said, in all our forecasts, we're assuming 0% from China. He made it clear that if Chinese developers stop using Nvidia's chips, the policy will result in the US losing half of the world's AI developers, who will switch to using Chinese chips. How does that help the US, he pointed out? Because what he really revealed is that the global technology order is splitting in two. Now, Washington talks of easing those export rules, but only to buy time, and definitely not to reconnect. Nvidia's most advanced chips will be reserved only for US companies and kept out of China and other companies, that the US President Donald Trump said in his interview with CBS's 60 Minutes program. The Blackwell chips under question are Nvidia's next-generation data center accelerators. A single Blackwell B200 chip allows roughly 2.5 times the data to go through as the last generation H200 for AI training. And it allows 15 times greater cost efficiency for inference compared to when you use the H100 chip. Now the H20, which are the chips that Nvidia was allowed to send to China, has roughly around 70 to 75% power as the H100 in raw AI compute. But it's only around 50% as effective when you're looking at the large-scale model training due to the bandwidth and interconnect restrictions that the chip has. Now, Nvidia just produced a chip which is tailor-made for China, known as the B30A. Now, that's simply one half of their best chip, the B300. Having one rather than two integrated circuits, it puts the B30A under the line for export restrictions that the US has, but it's also half the price of the B300. So critics argue that Chinese firms could simply buy both of those and at the same time achieve the same result. Now, this is the chip that is now under contention in the US. Beijing, on the other hand, it's building its own stock by now. From Huawei's Ascend chips to the new domestic AI accelerators, they're already replacing Nvidia. Huang told Bloomberg recently,
"It's up to China when they would like Nvidia products to go back to serve the Chinese market. I look forward to them changing their policy, and hopefully we'll be able to serve the Chinese market again."
Now, the illusion of tech interdependence has ended. What we're seeing now is that the architecture of decoupling, whether it's in code, silicon, or ecosystems, they're being rebuilt on separate foundations. So there's no real truce here at all. Now, as part of this, Jensen Huang himself is being attacked for not being patriotic enough. His comments recently on a visit to China in the summer, where he called himself as being Chinese, caused an uproar amongst the MAGA supporters.
First of all, I'm Chinese, and then I became an American Chinese.
If technology is being divided, trade has become a weapon as well to keep China contained. So President Trump's latest Asia tour looked like diplomacy, gold chairs, gala dinners, billion-dollar signings. But in the fine print of those agreements with Malaysia and Cambodia was something far more strategic, what the Financial Times called the poison pill clauses. I discussed this in detail in my last vlog, so do check it out if you didn't see it. But briefly, these clauses allow Washington to cancel the deal if either country deepens trade ties with a security risk, which of course means China. Similar agreement was signed with the UK as well, and the same clause is expected to enter the final Vietnam and Thailand agreements when they're signed as well. In other words, America's new trade deals are also basically loyalty tests. If you cooperate with Beijing, the US is going to pull the plug. At the same time, Beijing is playing its own version of leverage diplomacy. Just before that trip, China tightened its export controls on rare earth permanent magnets, those materials which are essential for US F-35 jets, for the missile guidance systems and renewable energy turbines. That wasn't a coincidence. It was obviously a message. You can pressure us on our technology, but we also control your metals. And here lies the real shift. Trade used to mean cooperation. It now means coercion. Every deal, every tariff, every so-called economic framework basically is now doubling as a geopolitical weapon. The US, along with members of the G7, have launched a critical minerals action plan, where they're now discussing setting price floors to help domestic rare earth companies where they exist in these countries, and even the creation of a joint stockpile of the minerals. Whether the US started it through its tech export controls or the Chinese followed with its rare earth controls, the reality is it started, and we are now watching economic warfare in slow motion. But the most transformative and the least understood front is monetary. The People's Bank of China has now purchased gold for 12 consecutive months. China's total reserves stand at 74 million troy ounces, worth roughly $297 billion. In parallel, Beijing is investing heavily in Central Asian gold production, building what analysts are describing as the backbone of a non-dollar trading system. The development of the gold corridor is crucial since gold doesn't need SWIFT. It's the oldest neutral asset in human history, and Beijing is using it to hedge against the next financial weaponization of the dollar. The Shanghai Gold Exchange, which was set up in 2002, is now the world's largest exchange which holds physical gold. In 2023, they processed 75% of all the total gold volume in the world. The custodian warehouses began later in 2014 to allow foreign participation in the Chinese market. But it really took off after the Russian assets were frozen in 2022. This year, the exchange has opened up vaults and trading contracts in Hong Kong, announcing that it was open for business to serve governments and institutional investors who are active in gold markets. Now, London remains the undisputed leader, with the Bank of England safeguarding more than 5,000 tons of global gold reserves. And the London Bullion Market Association oversees 90% of global over-the-counter global gold trading. Trust, liquidity, and centuries of established standards are London's main strengths. However, this isn't just about financial diversification alone. It's about geopolitical insulation. China's appeal lies in geopolitics. It's offering a sanctuary from those potential sanctions, risks for others as well as itself. Think about it. While Washington's debating tariffs and deficits, China is moving its reserves into assets that it can actually control. And the irony is that the world's largest exporter of goods no longer trusts the world's largest reserve currency. And that should worry Washington much more than any headline about Taiwan. The moment feels like 1939, or I hope 1981. Enemies are gathering and threats are mounting. You feel it, and I feel it. When Secretary of War Peter Hegseth says these words, the only threat that he is worried about, or that the Pentagon is preparing for, is that of China. During that interview on CBS's 60 Minutes, President Donald Trump said that President Xi promised him not to take military action against Taiwan, because they know the consequences, he said. However, news stories abound in Western press of Taiwan's takeover in 2027, and that the Chinese war preparedness is happening. Recently, the media was full of stories that, according to a classified report by the US Defense Intelligence Agency, China's been expanding its commercial ferry fleet, that massive civilian roll-on, roll-off vessels that normally carry passengers and cars across the Taiwan Strait, and that they've been quietly modifying them to carry tanks, armored vehicles, and heavy artillery. The report describes a systematic program of dual-use conversion, is what they call it, that they've installed reinforced decks, wider ramps, and modular loading systems that allow these civilian ships to operate like makeshift amphibious landing platforms. The report went on to warn that China's turning its maritime economy into a military asset, that these ferries are operated by state-linked logistics giants and registered as commercial vessels, but under China's military civil fusion doctrine, that they can be mobilized by the People's Liberation Navy within hours. Now, this news was then taken to create a square over Beijing's sea assault capacity, its fleet of specialized landing ships, which previously were always considered insufficient for a full-scale invasion of Taiwan. But now they announced that the addition of these hundreds of retrofitted ferries were going to change that calculus. Now, according to Western estimates, these conversions could double or even triple China's troop and equipment transport potential, and creating what US analysts have called a shadow invasion fleet. I mean, you can almost start laughing when you read their words. From space, they still look like civilian ships, but in wartime, they could deliver armor, supplies, and soldiers across that 100-mile strait faster than any traditional naval craft. It's calling this China's gray zone strategy, that the new weapons that were not built in plain sight, but they look like commerce today, could in a crisis become an army at sea, i.e. the modern version of Sun Tzu's old lesson that the supreme art of war is to win without fighting. So when you look at the handshakes and the smiles and the political communiques, remember what's happening beneath them. The tectonic plates are shifting. I'm Najma Minhas with GVS Deep Dive. Thank you for joining me today. Do share with me your thoughts and have a great day.